Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the kitchen. Today we have a pile of herbs lined up for you, and I'm just going to pose a little question. I'll name off what the herbs are in a minute in case you can't read them, but I want you to consider what all of these herbs might have in common. So, even if you're new to herbalism, even if you're steeped in this wisdom, this is a beautiful framework to begin to think about your herbs and the way that you're using them in the everyday. So, welcome to the channel. I'm Jessie Raspiller, your host and founder of Venture Well. And my passions in life is helping individuals find a natural balance to our modern world, oftentimes steeping us in the wisdom of the plants and how to create a relationship with our true nature. So, let's dive in. So, just to name, we have licorice root, we have eucalyptus, we have catnip or catmint, mallow, mullein. Oh, we've got calendula here and some lemon balm. So, any thoughts? The title might have given it away, but cold infusion. All of these herbs have a preference and or a uniqueness that gives their highest benefit through a cold infusion. So, what is a cold infusion? A cold infusion is a tea, essentially, but it's without using hot water. So it's basically room temperature water, and we put the herbs into this room temperature water for a set amount of time to get the maximum extraction that we can. And then we would want to consider why we would do a cold infusion over a standard infusion, which would be your boiling water or near boiling water for, about a 10-minute steep, or a decoction, which is going to be your stovetop simmer that could be a couple of hours that you're simmering. And so, what would all of these herbs have in common? Think about what we know. So, some of the more common ones: eucalyptus, maybe lemon balm's familiar. These are in the same categories as catnip, and they all have what? A big aromatic smell. Think about what happens when we add heat to aromatics. The energy, the volatile oils that is that aromatics begins to go upward, right? And so if we've ever looked at a cup of peppermint tea and we see that sort of essence, that film on top of that, that's our volatile oils. Not much different than what's captured inside in an essential oil, but an essential oil is another story, and a very dense population of volatile oils, where a tea is just extracting the volatile oils that those particular leaves have. And so what happens is that when we expose heat to a volatile oil, just as you would imagine, it begins to dispel, and it dispels very quickly. Now, does it mean that it's wrong to enjoy a warm cup of peppermint tea? Absolutely not. Just means that you might not get the maximum benefits that peppermint has to offer, or some of these other mint-based herbs have to offer, or aromatic, I should say. And there's just other ways to start to think about this then too, that depending on the condition or the enjoyment that you want from this particular herb, another framework that we could use would be considered using a cold infusion. So similarly, licorice root, mallow, and mullein are going to have more of a demulcent, which is this stuff that we call a mucilage, which is really, really beautiful for all of our mucous membranes. Oh, and we got calendula here too. And calendula, when we add hot water to it, tends to create a really bitter tea. And so one of the ways to get the soothing properties of calendula internally without having to go deep into the bitter flavor is to bring it into a cold infusion. So what a cold infusion is going to do is probably quite obvious at this point, but it's not going to be adding heat. And without the heat, we can begin to softly extract all the minerals and nutrients and begin to capture those into your tisane or your tea in this instance. And so the best way that I know to do this is our standard way of taking a mason jar. You've probably seen me do this on Instagram a million times. This is actually two different herbal extractions that I did today. I want to share about those in a moment. But let's start with this one, this darker colored one. If you've followed me on Instagram for any given time, you've probably heard me talk about my adaptogen tea. I put it next to my teapot every morning so that I remember to make it. And again, I'm not putting hot water in here, but it's just a reminder. And sort of that act of like, while I'm making my morning lemon water or making my coffee to get this ready. Because we're not using heat, we have to consider what action is happening how is the solvent, or the water in this case, extracting? And it's through something called, oh gosh, I just lost the word. It'll come back to me. Circulatory displacement. And essentially, if you get the right set of herbs, I've witnessed this before. It's not happening on this one, and I don't think the video camera would be able to pick it up. But essentially, when we take our tea bag, and you want something that can suspend, so you can use a reusable tea bag. I would really recommend not using a tea ball at this for this particular infusion, because it's going to sink to the bottom and it creates more difficulty with this circulatory displacement. But essentially, we would take our tea bag, fill it with the amount of herbs that we want. We would suspend it at the top of the container. So essentially, I've got the string so that it only has so far to go. And then what begins to happen is gravity actually becomes the alchemy in this process. And so if you watch closely, you can start to see the minerals and the vitamins and all that we're extracting begin to create this circular motion within our mason jar. So not much different, that I would say, than having like a sun tea, which is a little bit more of a familiar mechanism. But in that case, we're getting the solar power that is creating the displacement. So in this case, because we don't have heat, because we don't have sun, we're going to want to let this steep for quite a while. Ideally, most cold infusions, we would want to do about 4 to 12 hours. When it's the middle of summer, I love to take my adaptogen tea, let it sit on the counter for about an hour, and then toss it in the refrigerator and have iced tea at the beach later on. In this case, we're coming upon winter, and my constitutions don't necessarily enjoy cold when we have cold going on. And so I'm just leaving my herbal infusions, my cold infusions, room temperature these days. And so this is my adaptogen tea. And if you've been watching us play around with making some treats for Poppy for her birthday, this is the catnip that we've made. So it may look like just clear water, but I can tell off the video camera that there's a nice hue to it. I want to actually open it up, just see what kind of smell we get off of it. Oh my gosh, it was stronger than I expected. So that's, again, catnip's part of the mint family. It's got that aromatic. So if I were to drink this, I would get all of the benefits of those aromatics, plus the volatile oils and everything else that catnip has going on. And in this case, catnip, as well as many of these herbs, are really soothing for mucous membranes. I think about mullein and eucalyptus being incredible for cold and flu season. And by default, we would think, well, when we're having a cold or a flu, we really want something warming. And yes, that's true. But what I might recommend is using something like eucalyptus or mullein in sort of a facial steam. So putting a boiling pot on the stovetop, bringing that to a boil, turning it off, and then putting some of those herbs in there and letting the herbs get to you, again, from the way that the volatile oils want to go. Just, covering the head with a towel, obviously. And so a lot of these herbs are actually really soothing. And so it may feel contraindicated to not heat them because of the way that they nourish when we don't feel so well. And it's not wrong if we do decide to do that. I'm just sharing with you the way that cold infusion can actually bring a little bit more bonus and a little bit more benefit to the everyday things that we're already considering. So if you have any questions on this, let me know. But what we're going to do next is we're going to jump over to a video for Poppy, my puppy's first birthday, and we're going to make her a little treat with this cold infusion that we've been doing with catnip. So come with us, come learn about how catnip isn't just for cats, it's also for dogs. And in the meantime, make sure you subscribe and like this video. If you find it useful, make sure you share it with a friend. Otherwise, any useful links are down in the show notes. Thank you so much. Stay curious, my friends.